Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. My name is Margherita Mazzone, and I'm a master's student in linguistic sciences at the University of Turin. Today, I will present my research project entitled Click Language or Just Clickbait, from phonetic salience to digital mimesis, examining the portrayal of Hadzane and its impact on the Hadza community. So most of you probably already know who the Hadza are, but I am sure, as Professor Tosco said before, there are a few students of the bachelor and few spectators. So I will give you a little, I will briefly talk about who the Hadza are. So the Hadza are a hunter-gatherer population living mainly near Lake Eyasi in Tanzania. Over the last few years, they have become increasingly visible on the social media platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. So what makes them especially attractive to the digital attention economy is the perception that they represent a form of ancestral humanity. Their lifestyle is constantly framed as primitive, authentic, untouched, and closer to nature. Another element that contributes to this fascination is their language, the Hadzane, which contains click consonants. So these sounds are highly salient for foreign audiences and are often perceived as exotic or extraordinary. Another element that contributes to this, however, my research starts from a critical observation on social media. These clicks are no longer treated as a part of a linguistic system. Instead, they become a spectacle. The language is consumed aesthetically rather than semantically. This is why I use the expression clickbait in the title of the paper. The click consonants themselves become the hook used to attract viewers and generate a virality. The first theoretical section of my paper focuses on language as a manipulable resource. I argue that language is not only a tool for communication, but can also become a strategic instrument shaped by social interaction. In the case of the Hadza, this manipulation appears to be strongly influenced by external forces, especially influencers and content creators. Creators search for sounds and images capable of satisfying the algorithm, such as close-up shots while eating, dramatic hunting scenes, and especially click-heavy speech. So the clicks stop functioning exclusively as a phoneme and become a performative object. The Hadza are often encouraged to perform stereotypical version of themselves in front of the camera. For example, in some videos from the corpus, Hadza individuals pretend to not understand how smartphone works, attempt to remove tattoos from tourist skin or exaggerate reactions into ordinary objects. I want to make clear that these scenes are not natural ethnographic documentation. They are performances shaped by tourism, algorithms, and audience expectations. So the methodology of this research was based on the construction of a multimedia corpus composed of more than 30 videos collected mainly from Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. For every video, I analyzed captions, creator framings, user comments, recurring visual patterns, and discourse strategies. The comment section was particularly important because it reveals how the audience perceived the Hadza and their language. During this analysis, several recurring tropes emerged, and here in my slide you can see an overview of the tropes that I identified. One of the most pervasive tropes emerging from the database is what I called ancestral happiness. Many users describe the Hadza as naturally happier because they supposedly live outside capitalism and modern stress. This narrative, in my opinion, strongly recalls Rousseau's concept of noble sauvage. And the Hadza become symbols of humanity, imagined as pure, free, and uncorrupted. The next trope is what I called exotic glossolalia. So let's stop a little bit on the name. I used the term glossolalia, taking it from Summer 1972, if I'm not wrong, that usually glossolalia usually refers to the emission of sequences of sounds similar to language, but without any comprehensible semantic meaning, often associated with states of religious ecstasy or, in this case, with an external perception of that reduces the language to pure. Awareness of the salience of click phonemes has led their exaggerated presence in video, although Hadzane is not empirically one of the most clickiest language. These sounds are overexposed in social media context. So basically, in the social media discourse, Hadzane undergoes a process of desemantization. The language is no longer interpreted as grammatical system, but as an exotic sound. And users, what it's funny is that they describe it as sounds and rhythm, noise language, or even compare it in some comments to Bitbox or Wi-Fi passwords. The third trope is healthy primitive, is what I called healthy primitive, because modernity becomes associated with pollution, stress, disease, and corruption. Wildlife in the savannah is imagined as naturally healthy and pure, is what I call phantom cannibalism. And even though the Hadza do not practice cannibalism at all, comments repeatedly associate them with savagery and danger. And you will see a few comments at the end of this slides that were taken from the corpus. Another recording discourse concerns the idea that Hadzane is one of the oldest language in the world, and many users describe the language as impossible to learn, impossible to transcribe, or somehow prehistoric, which of course we do not have any scientific proof of this. And if we believe that a click consonant is a consonant and it's a phoneme, then we would agree on the fact that a click is not different than a bilabial, older than a bilabial consonant. The last trope is piety and racism. And basically, I have found comments repeatedly moving from piety. So basically, they cannot really understand that the Hadza life choice is an actual form of determination, and they see it as a lack, poverty, or backwardness. And racism, of course, we will see some few comments, but you can imagine what is the narrative. Okay, here are the comments. I have taken few comments. So, for example, you can see that in the ancestral happiness, someone is note all comments are reproduced as written. So even if you see few grammatical mistakes, I just wanted to reproduce it as loyal as possible and to preserve authenticity. So basically, you can find no envy between them, as if these people cannot envy one another. In exotic glossolalia, it's like beatbox, sounds like a Wi-Fi passwords, a lot of emoji of ping pong, which I didn't mention here. In the healthy primitive, there were a few comments that were arguing that the Hadza do not suffer from cancers, tumors, and that this is the real human life. And in the phantom cannibalism, you can see that few users were arguing that at the end of the video, the cameraman was to be eaten, etc., etc. These are my references. Thank you so much. If you have wanted to add something I forgot, that is the initial idea of our corpus was that we made an hypothesis that was that the younger generation were, excuse me, like clicking more than the older generations, and we wanted to have as much data as possible to later put it in an MP4 form and to preserve, sorry, the datas. But this is, of course, something that we will possibly analyze later on because it takes time to analyze each video. But yeah, this was my presentation. Thank you so much. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask it, and I will go back with the slides in case you need it.
Thank you very much, Margherita. Kind of a different sort of data rather than the Hadza language itself, more sort of what people are saying about instances of the language as it appears on social media. So applying this sort of discourse analysis perspective. Tom, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Margarita, for your talk. Just as a remark, I mean, most of the things you presented hold even to a larger degree to the San people in Southern Africa. And I think I just wanted to point out to all of us, there is a special status of clicks as speech sounds, because you know that you could, if it were just the language or hunter gatherer or anything, it could work with many other African groups. But the clicks is a special phenomenon because we are so familiar with clicks in the Mediterranean, in the Near East, in Europe. Clicks are used, and that's why we all have a kind of opinion about clicks, and that's why they are so fascinating to us. And we have even a more drastic opinion on clicks than, let's say, about labial veilers, or you know, there are many exotic sounds in the languages of the world, but it's in particular clicks which we are so obsessed. I mean, we, in the sense of Europe, etc. I think that should be something you might want to integrate into your thinking. You know, not focusing that much on just the Hadza, because it's really a package: hunter-gatherer, clicks, genetics, which really lets us, I mean, us, you know, let's say collectively in our cultural area, on groups like that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. But my research was more on how we feel clicks are different than phonemes, other phonemes, which is basically, you know, as linguists, we cannot say something like this. Otherwise, this will, I mean, like it can be a little bit problematic, in my opinion, to define clicks like as not special phononyms, which I understand, like they are very hard to make, etc., but not on this, to not put them on the same level as other phonemes.
Tom, this is an interesting observation all the same. I mean, they're different, but they are sort of familiar enough
That is my point.
that they are
That's exactly my
recognizable.
point. Yes.
I find this interesting. It's an interesting observation, and I certainly hadn't thought about it before. That's
Well, I mean, since I've been working on click languages for a long time, I'm that is really, it makes a difference, all the difference, because you could pick any African or other groups in the world which are hunter-gatherers and have strange sounds, but nobody, it just works really with African groups with clicks, hunter-gatherers, and then the genetic component as well. So it's really the familiarity and strangeness of clicks which lets our cultural group focus on this
and sort of yeah, and so then it
speech
becomes
sound.
a question not of the sounds, but of the
Yes.
social relations that throw these sounds into relief. Margherita, do you have any other thoughts or comments on Tom's comment?
Um, no, I really appreciated Pam's interview. So thank you so much. Yeah, we can move on. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Julia, feel free to ask your question.
Uh, my question was a bit the same question that you asked us, and it was like when you had all the digital world, and you could select every kind of video, what made you choose the videos that you choose? Like, was it the comments that you found? Was it the views, or something in particular? Did you like wanted to have like specific video, I don't know, where they clicked, or specific videos where they cooked, or like specific things that you wanted to analyze? So like what was what was your criteria when you decided what to analyze?
Okay, so my first criteria was like entering any social media and basically search for Hadza as a word and see whatever was coming out. And later I started noticing that there were a few creators that were producing more videos. And I think that most of them were actually I don't know. I actually discussed this with Professor Harvey, and we noticed that there were a few outsider that were maybe like they were speaking Hadza, but they were not specifically Hadza, and they were having these pages or trying to push a narrative. So, for example, there is a whole documentary on YouTube that I would say it's not that bad. It's not that bad. I mean, coming from the lectures of Professor Harvey, we as Julia, Daniele, and Giuseppe, we know what is Hadza and what is not Hadza now. So it wasn't that bad, but there was still like few things added that made it more clickbait. And that's what I was looking for. So the things that they were not Hadza and they were making the content basically explosive. For example, there are a few videos. It's very common to find videos when where they eat, and there is like this zoom on their face and where, for example, there are a few videos of them finding some kind of natural hot water source and boiling eggs. And we were talking with Professor Harvey on about it, and we were saying that they do not have eggs. Like eggs are not that common. And yeah, so this was basically the things I was looking for. And of course, I was looking for like the videos that had the majority, like the most numerous comments. And it was nice, but I did not include this in the paper to see that when the creator was from a specific culture, for example, Italian creators going there, the Italian audience had specific comments. Turkish creator going there and like filming and etc. had specific comments and specific captions. So this was interesting, but it wasn't like the data were not enough to actually make a point on this.
Bonnie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to be last because I've, of course, got a ton of references for you. And I would imagine that a lot of the American commenters are very focused on diet, right? How to improve their diet in a paleo kind of way. You know, that's what I've seen in a lot of videos. I just wanted to point out, of course, there's a huge anthropological literature on tourism and also hunter-gatherers. Just giving you a real old reference on professional primitives. So this idea that you're going to present yourself as a hunter-gatherer, like your occupation, and perhaps, you know, what you know, in how you present yourself to outsiders. And then we have the idea of even the concept of hunter-gathering as a type of human society being a relatively recent invention. And Tom pointed, you know, it is interesting. A lot of the literature that I've seen on tourism does not talk about language very much. And in fact, most of the literature on tourism in southern Africa has to do more with, yes, how authentic people are. Are they authentic or not? And especially in southern Africa, people want to see the trance dance. So it's strangely enough, even though we're talking about people in the Kalahari who use clicks, people aren't coming to see them to hear their clicks. That's not, in my experience, been, apart from the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, people more want to see that, what they think of as that primitive lifestyle, as opposed to just hearing a lot of clicks. But of course, these languages have a lot more clicks in the discourse than Hadza does, so they don't have to sort of insert more clicks to make it more clicky. So I've never seen any commentary that people have changed their language to appeal to the tourists. And on that question of authenticity, in 1997, I was there when one of the very first cultural tourist groups visited the Hadza, and the tourists all went on and on raving about how authentic the Hadza were, in contrast to the Maasai that they had just met, who had been the focus of a lot of tourism in the years prior. So they, that even more than pity, by the way, and don't mix up pity and piety, those are completely different things. This focus on authenticity. And Mauro, before I move to you, I have one more point, which is that people that talk about it sounding like beatboxing, it's actually quite a cogent point, because beatboxing includes, here's some studies, a lot of clicks and ejectives, and we all know now that Hadza has a lot of clicks and ejectives. So although it sounds very dismissive, it is actually a salient observation on that point.
Margherita, do you have any reflections or any thing that you would like to respond to Bonnie's feedback?
No, I completely agree. I did not notice I made that mistake with piety and piety. Just I think that as for example, people perceive, not all of us, of course, but since I was new to the Hadza situation as well, I think that it's particular how each one of us is, when he's introduced to a language, perceives the language itself. So for example, the glottal stuff for me, at the beginning, it was like the person was posing, you know, like, so I did not recognize this as part of the inventory of the phononyms. So I think, yeah, it's really it's extraordinary, the fact that people realize that bitbox and clicks are kind of close, but at the same time, do they really realize that this is a letter? That was my point, which I don't know. I think this is psychology.
Mauro, you have your hand up. Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
So we have Tom's criterion for interest, touristic interest in strange sounds. Bonnie's adds authenticity. Possibly a third one could be physical appearance. I'm thinking here of in southwest Ethiopia, the labial plates, the lip plates of certain in the women and certain Morsi populations. At the end of the story, it would be interesting. It's not something that we as linguists can do, and well, to have a statistical data. Probably it could be shown that if two or more of these criteria converge, and in the case of the Hadza they do, at least partially, maybe 2 out of 3 converge, maybe you have a definite non-casual statistical increase in number of YouTube productions, these kind of things. So to correlate this with hard numbers, I would find it fascinating, and a way to actually to prove certain things, because we haven't so far. Thank you. It was very interesting, Margherita.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Just comment that the glottal stop is very salient in Hawaii because it has a symbol, the okina. It's a turned apostrophe, curved apostrophe, and so that might be something to look at compared to glottal stop in Hadza.
Yeah, I think even in Egyptian dialect, like it's very salient because that's my first, let's say, contact with the glottal stop, because they basically they have Hamza in Arabic, generally speaking, but the Egyptian dialect as well basically has an innovation that makes the qa sound become a. So that was my first contact with it.
Mauro, another question. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Very interesting, Margherita, this observation. I mean, not everything, even if phonemic, is salient enough or salient on the same degree. I mean, glottal stop could be much less salient for the speaker, but think about gemination, geminates. Why is it that languages, I mean, speakers of languages that have geminates, such as Italians, constantly and continuously make mistakes in writing them down? We do not make mistakes in other things, but we make mistakes in writing geminates. And we are discussing these very things in these very days with Antonio Romano, you know, in our small phonetics laboratory. And actually we are discovering that gemination is even phonetically not so clear cut. I discovered that, for example, sometimes instead of I didn't know that myself, I do not make a real geminate, I make a glottalized. And I hear it as a geminate, and many people do the same. But this has nothing to do with Hadza, of course. But I think it would be very interesting to study this small part. And another thing, of course, is vowel length. Vowel length is a typical thing that speakers know that it exists, but they don't know how to write it down.
Lennon, you have your hand up. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a question I don't know. Maybe also, let's see, Tom can also respond to this. He mentioned about this attention to Greek-speaking communities in connection to genetics. So I was wondering, could this attention reflect exoticism rather than objective importance somehow? Or I don't know if you said this explicitly, European fascination with the Greek-speaking communities in connection with genetics. And so I was wondering if this attention to these groups reflect exoticism rather than objective importance of the languages.
Yeah, I mean, clicks is one component of an exotic package for Europeans. hunter-gatherer, cliques, and genetics, which is in particular salient in Southern Africa, because you know, there's this very old racism. Actually, there are some articles which say that European racism, in particular, developed in the confrontation with Southern African populations. So, so that's what I meant. So this package of groups which pool, primitive traits for European colonial views, and of course cliques in this sense, and certain biological features, etc., contribute or making this package.
And for the purpose of the recording, because Tom won't be visible later on, when he mentioned the word primitive, he was giving his most enthusiastic scare quotes possible. And of course, that would be consistent with what Tom has written over the years as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's go to Simone. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned that like Turkish comments were different from Italian comments, and each nationality has different topics. I was curious about what topics they were discussing on in the comments.
Okay,
You remember them?
Yeah, I mean, I have them in my corpus. I tried to translate as much as I could from Turkish, Azerbaijani, Russian, Italian, Arabic. For the Turkish ones, they looked more interested in the language, while the Russians, for example, were more interested in the lifestyle. And I have seen few Portuguese, I suppose Brazilian comments that were more in the PT, in the PT section, saying like, "Oh no, my brothers." And one of them was saying, "How is it possible that civilization did not reach them?" So yeah, this were, if I remember correctly, this were the. But yeah, I remember very clearly that the Italian side of the social media was very racist.
Some more information that shows us that a lot of the comments are much more reflective of perhaps the people who are making it than the people who are being portrayed or the portrayals that we are seeing. That's interesting as well. Goes perhaps a couple steps beyond our linguistic methodologies, but maybe this is a call for some further interdisciplinary interest from a humanities point of view for Hadza. Do we have any final sort of summarizing comments or thoughts, Margherita, before we move on?
Yeah, just one thing I forgot to say, which I think it's very important, is that my paper might look a little bit, I mean, it was to an extent like critic, but at the same time, I want to underline that there is some kind of agency of the Hadza people. So, because they are aware of the way they are portraying themselves, but my how can I say that? I think that the question is, do all of them agree with this type of portrait? Because some of them know very, very well that behaving in a certain way, they will attract tourism, money, and visibility, which is their right, as each one of us, as each population has the right to. But at the same time, I'm not that sure that any individual in the Hadza community want that as their representation, because sometimes, this is my opinion, it can be very misunderstandable, I would say, put it in a nice way.
And of course, we're sitting here talking about it from the ivory tower. But I know that these are discussions that are going on in Hadza communities now. Hadza people had a community meeting in August, I think, of 2025, and this was one of the very first things on their agenda. Look at how we're being portrayed on social media. What do we think of this as a community? And I believe that Lenin is going to be continuing on with more on this subtopic.